Now you've learned a little bit about energy, we're actually going to go in and have a look at how to tell a story about what's happening as energy transfers and transforms around us. And there's no easier way to do this than with Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. Here we have Wile E. Coyote setting up his next trap for Roadrunner, and it's to do with elastic potential energy. Now, as you can see here, Coyote is compressing a spring. Now the energy to compress that spring hasn't just popped out of nowhere. He's actually going to be using his own energy and putting it into that spring to compress it. And we'll go through what that means in just a second. Now, as he's doing this, he's taking the energy in him, his chemical potential energy, turning it into kinetic to compress that spring, and now it's elastic potential. And whoa, now he's let go and he's converting it back into kinetic energy to chase over to Roadrunner. Now at this point we're going to leave our scenario and see if we can put that into perspective. First of all, Coyote had to actually push the spring back, and it took a lot of effort, in case you hadn't noticed, in order to compress that spring. And while doing so, he was taking the chemical potential energy that he has in his body from his breakfast, and to make that nice and short, we're going to call that CPE, and he used it to compress the spring. And while he did that, that meant that he was actually moving the spring, so that is motion kinetic energy. When he compressed the spring, he gave it elastic potential energy, the potential to bounce back. Okay, so that elastic potential energy was then put into the spring as he compressed it, and we'll call that EPE for short. And then when he released it, running out of room here, of course he then went flying through the air, so the spring sprung. And as he was flying through the air, that meant that elastic potential energy was transformed back into motion, which is a kinetic energy. And that is the story of how the energy went from the chemical potential energy in his food all the way to him flying through the air with motion. Okay? Energy doesn't come from nowhere, it's transferred or transformed. And in this case, because we have chemical going to motion here, this is a transform, because it's gone from one type of energy into a different type of energy. Same here and same here. They're all examples of transforming. Now let's look at what happens to Coyote. Now he's at the top of a mountain, and this is going to hurt. Down he goes, and he ends up getting squished. Now, I'm not going to go much further than this because we're actually going to talk about what's happening here. If you look at Coyote down the bottom here, here's what he looks like. He's certainly not feeling too happy at this point because that landing was really hard. So let's go back to our drawing board. So the next thing we saw was Coyote at the top of the hill. And all of a sudden there was no bottom, no hill. So he had loads of gravitational potential energy. He had the potential to fall, and fall he did. And as he was falling, that gravitational potential energy was converted into motion, which is a kinetic energy. Now, then he got to the bottom. Now, as we all know, we don't usually survive falls like this. That's because we tend to get squished. Now, squishing is an interesting thing that you need to think about there. When you're squished, literally your atoms are rearranged in your body, to think of it like that, which means you have changed shape. Now, remember from our previous lesson that changing shape means that you have had kinetic energy go through in order to move those atoms around. Again, that's a type of motion kinetic energy. It's just that instead of you actually moving from one place to another, the atoms have been rearranged in their position in your body and squishing you. So let's see what types of energy transfers we've got here now, or transformations. We've got gravitational potential energy going to motion kinetic energy. Now, this is one type of energy to a different type of energy. That is a transformation. However, here we've got motion kinetic energy going to another type of motion kinetic energy, falling, squishing. Same type of energy, just used in a different way. We call this energy transfer because it's the same type of energy. So essentially it comes down to two different things here. You've got energy transformations, where you've got one type of energy turning into another type of energy. And you've got energy transfers, which is one type of energy transferring in a different object with the same type of energy. Okay, and you have to just understand how to draw up the story of what's happening. You have to separate out every little step, and as you look at the different steps, think about what type of energy is involved, and you join each of those steps with a little arrow like this. That is called an energy diagram. Now we're going to make these a lot more detailed later on, but for now, this is how far you need to go. So to finish off this activity, you're going to try and draw energy diagrams with the following scenarios. Coyote on the boulder on the top of a cliff, Coyote pulling himself into a stretched rubber band and shooting himself off, and Coyote with a piece of dynamite trying to blow up Roadrunner. You know that's not going to end well for Coyote. I want you guys to try and draw some energy diagrams with that, and you're going to be able to check your answers using another video.